2 weeks is about as long as we'll push the trip. We start to run out of bait, and then we also run out of time on the crab that we are putting in the tank. And some of those 2-week trips, you only come up with one tank, 70,000 pounds of crab, right? 60,000 pounds. And so the good comes with the bad.
This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. I'm John Susman. The Bering Sea is one of the most intense patches of ocean on Earth. It covers over 2 million square kilometres and is bordered on the east and northeast by Alaska, on the west by the Russian Far East, on the south the Aleutian Islands, and on the far north the Arctic Circle. Strong winds, freezing temperatures and icy water are normal conditions. The combination makes for some of the most ferocious waves on the planet, where the water can rise and fall 30 feet on a normal day. It is remote, desolate and intensely dangerous. What would possibly drive anyone into these waters? It's the hunt for some of the most valuable seafood to be found. The Bering Sea is renowned to have one of the most diverse and productive marine ecosystems on the planet, with species such as king crab, apelio and tanner crabs, wild salmon, pollock and the famous black cod. Commercial fishing is lucrative business in the Bering Sea. On the US side alone, commercial fisheries catch approximately $1 billion worth of seafood annually, while Russian Bering Sea fisheries are thought to be double that. Captain Sean Dwyer began his career as a commercial crab fisherman at the age of 13 on his parents' boat, the Jennifer A. Sean is a salmon fisherman during the June to July summer season, but during the punishing winter, he's one of the rare experts who turns his fishing skills on an industry he knows well. Very few people are going to risk their lives in the kind of weather that the Bering Sea throws up, and fewer still have the basket of skills needed to not only survive, but thrive in the conditions. Fishing in the Bering Sea requires a dedication and mindful attitude that few other industries demand. Sean Dwyer is both dedicated and mindful.
Yeah, my name is Sean Dwyer, and I'm from Seattle, Washington. Bree and I live just north of Seattle in a town called Edmonds, and I fish crab in the Bering Sea. Commercial fishing is our family business. My mom is actually from Alaska, and on her side of the family, I'm a 5th generation Alaska fisherman. So it's in the blood for sure. My parents met on a boat in Alaska and then started their commercial fishing business, which I am now a co-owner and an operator of, right? And we manage the business and yeah. So my parents bought a boat in the 80s, and my sister, who's older than me, she her name's Brenna A, right? She was on the boat when she was 6 months old, and then that boat would work in the summertime. My mom and sister would go up and hang out with my dad in the summertime. And then in the wintertime, it would catch crab. And so that was before my time around. But that boat actually, it sank the year that I was born in 1992. And it sank in January. I was born in March. So I was born into our family's commercial fishing business that had just been devastated by this boat sinking, the St. George. And so when I was really little, my dad was he was diversified in the industry. He was kind of working for different shipyards, hydraulics companies, fishing operations, and then a couple of years down the line, my parents bought another boat, the Jennifer A, which is named after my mom, and that's the boat that is has my earliest memories. We would go up in the summertime, and my dad would relieve the skipper that he had running the boat year round, and we'd come on with the whole family. And I can remember, sitting on the bow, kind of hanging out, playing with my little Matchbox cars, and and I can remember one of them rolling out the scupper and falling overboard, and thinking, I'm never going to get that back. Like, that's gone forever. Bought that boat in 96. I was 4 years old. And yeah, there's photos from that first year where 4 and 5 years old, my sister at 6 and 7 years old, we were on the boat together with my parents. And then, yeah, I mean, we grew up we grew up with a little bit of, with family medical issues. My mom is a cancer survivor. My dad had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And so those early years on the boat, everything was really good. And then my mom was diagnosed with cancer and obviously treatment and time at home kind of changed some things for my parents. And then shortly after that, my dad was diagnosed with ALS. And so that was when I was 13 when he was diagnosed. And I was at a young age where I was pretty impressionable and made a conscious decision that, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to be a commercial fisherman like my dad was. And I want to learn as much as I can from him while I can. And yeah, so that kind of really is when I kind of flipped the switch from like, hey, it's not just fun family stuff that we do, and it's different because nobody else's parents are doing this with them. It's just, it can be a career. And if I want to do it, I have an opportunity. So I started kind of working on the boat at a young age and spending my summers in Alaska working on the boat for different captains that we had hired and whatnot. And so, yeah, it was a diverse upbringing for sure.
Sean's passion for the ocean and love of boats was nurtured from an early age, but it was the vision and drive of his ailing father that helped him go from enthusiastic amateur to the youngest captain to ever command a commercial fishing boat in the Bering Sea.
So I'd go to school, throughout the year, and then I'd miss the last couple of days of school to hop on the boat, and I'd be in Alaska on a boat from beginning of June to the end of August, beginning of September, and then hop right back into school. And I would work in the shipyard. As soon as I was able to drive, I would drive my dad down to the shipyard, and when he could get around, he'd put me to work, basically, chipping paint and painting and organizing things, and then I'd work in the shipyard on the weekends or after school, and then when I graduated high school, I went to technical college and focused on diesel engines and heavy equipment, and so tech school was set up to where I had class early in the morning, and then all my midday and afternoons were free. So, that was the same thing. I'd work all summer on the boats, and then I'd go to my technical college in the morning and then work in the shipyard all day and afternoon. So, but that was really a good time for me because I spent a lot of time with my dad, who at that point, his ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, was hitting him pretty hard. He was in a wheelchair. He had issues breathing. So, I was kind of his eyes and hands down on the boat. And, I'd send him photos while I was down there working on things. And, he'd tell me what to do, basically. Just so, okay, you're going to want to loosen this bolt and then reach behind. There'll be another bolt back there. And, it was funny. It was a cool way to learn kind of all the knowledge that he had stored up over the years. And for me, it gave me a real advantage moving forward because I had that time with him, and he was just a really knowledgeable guy. Like I said, I started working in the summer times when I was about 13 years old. And then as soon as I was done with tech school at 20 years old, I started going, and my first year, I think I worked 10 months out of the year on the boat as a deckhand and then engineer in the summertime, and then did that for 3 years, I guess, those real long seasons, and then in 2015, or excuse me, I guess in 2014, I started running the Brenna A in the summertime, and then so I ran the boat 2014 summertime. I fished 2014 winter, and then 2015 summertime I ran the boat, and then I had an opportunity to get some more fishing rights so that we could run both boats in the wintertime instead of just one boat. And so, yeah, in 2015, 23 years old, I I took the Brenna A out and went fishing for Western tanner crab in the Bering Sea. And that was, at the time, I was the youngest captain in the Bering Sea. And as far as I know, there's one other guy that I know that started when he was 22. I know a couple other guys that started when they were 23 also. But I think as far as, the history of crab fishing in the Bering Sea, 23 is pretty darn early or young.
An experienced and well-trained captain is uniquely qualified to maintain the big picture view of competing priorities, such as weather, conditions, time, vessel fitness and suitability, crew ability, and in the case of a skipper on a commercial fishing vessel in the Bering Sea, a sixth sense on where and when crabs are to be found. Being a good captain goes well beyond boat handling and fishing abilities, though, and can be a challenge for a mature, seasoned leader. Taking on such a role at 23 is a demand few young men face in their careers.
I can remember when I left with my first load of pots on the boat vividly. The Bering Sea is treacherous for many different reasons. I think the biggest of which in my mind that stands out is it's kind of the birthing ground for a lot of these low pressure system storms that hit the western coast of North America. And the storms that come through, they can be huge. I mean, huge, like depressions that, are hurricanes in other parts of the world. In the Bering Sea, they're just standard procedure. So you get these big depressions that lead to a lot of wind, but the other factor is tide. So, you can have a day where it's, blowing 35, 40 knots, and every 6 hours that tide direction of the water is changing. And when the wind and tide are against each other, the wave factor gets crazy. I mean, they'll stack up on you, and all of a sudden you'll be in 15, 20 foot seas, and then, here comes some 30 footers and they're breaking because the tide's running. And I think that's something that people don't quite understand, is that the Bering Sea, when you look at it on a chart, it looks like just this big body of water, but really the topography of the bottom of the ocean floor, there's a big shelf, and it's called the Eastern Bering Sea Shelf. And there's a couple different canyons that are on the edges of this shelf, but it's a big, vast desert out there, that's deep. I mean, it's anywhere from like 80 to, well, it shallows up, but the edge is about 80 fathoms, fathom being 6 feet. And then it shallows all the way up as you get towards the mainland. But what that is you get, water that's 2 miles deep. And then in in a short span of distance, it goes up to, 500 feet deep. And, you get these big upwellings of current, and then that tide just smokes across the big desert that is the Bering Sea shelf. And the tide is really, really deceiving. It's something that when I was running the boat, I didn't fully understand at first. And when you're a deckhand and it's crappy weather, it's just crappy weather. But when you're a captain and you're trying to drive a boat through it and keep a crew safe, it's difficult.
Fishing in the Bering Sea requires fishermen to be adept at fishing for a range of seasonal species throughout the year. Target catch is decided depending on the biological season, along with the fishing quotas and species populations. Conditions in these waters, however, remain pretty consistent: rough and more rough.
I'll give you the synopsis of the seasons. We have our first Bering Sea crab fishery starts October 15th, and that's Bristol Bay red king crab. So our boats, and I would say 90% of the fleet, are based out of Dutch Harbor, which is an island in the Aleutian chain, just kind of dead south of the center of the Bering Sea. And so October we'll go out for king crab, and that season is typically short, maybe a week or two. Come back in and offload that, and then on an average year, we may go fish some of that Bering Sea tanner crab, which is like in between the size of a king crab and a snow crab. A snow crab, the opilio are small, the tanners get a little bigger. But we'll go fish that. and then come home for a little bit. And then after the first of the year, we go up for Opelio. And so when you're departing for king crab, we might be fishing 200 to 275 miles northeast of Dutch Harbor, kind of in the Bristol Bay area of Bering Sea. And then when we fish for tanners and opies, we fish more up in the middle or the west or even the way northwest of the Bering Sea. And so, for example, when you depart out on an Opelio trip, these last couple of years, we've been fishing almost all the way up near the Russian border. And 2 years ago, I was fishing literally on the border within a quarter mile. And, that's it's a 3-day run from Dutch Harbor straight to the northwest. So you're already way out west and you're pretty far north when you're in Dutch. And then, you get all the way up above 60 degrees north and, you're at the US Russian border. And, you're up there, I mean, you're a long ways from any sort of support, for the helicopter to get to you, the Coast Guard helicopters to get to you. It's a long journey for them. And sometimes if the weather, is treacherous, they can't even get there. So, but that's where the crab have been. And when you look at these fisheries and you think, okay, how much time and effort am I going to spend? Do I want to drive to where the crab are? Or do I want to try to find something somewhere else? Well, you just go where the crab are, and that's where you make money. But yeah, you're out there.
With multiplying regulations, the fishing season for certain species shortened significantly, and the challenge of commercial returns. There is a demand for fishermen to race to catch as many crabs as possible in short periods of time. Trip planning is vital to minimise the time away and maximise the catch. Moving the half-ton steel pots around the deck and around the sea floor requires both plenty of muscle and plenty of brains.
3-day trip to the north, you get up there, you're going to get there and you set your gear off. So, we kind of work around the clock. The schedule is set by the fishing, not necessarily what we as fishermen want to do. So you get there, no matter what time of day or night, you set all your gear out. And what I like to do when I first start, if I have no information, is I'll spread out pretty wide. I might cover, like, let's say, if I have 120 pots to work with, or 200 pots to work with, I'll spread out to where I'm covering maybe a 40 by 40 mile box, or maybe a 20 by 40 mile box. And what I try to do is I try to stretch my gear out, the spacing in between my pots and my strings of pots, to where I can get the best sample of the terrain that I want to fish, right? So as far as finding crab goes, what I do is I look for the bottom where they would want to be, and that's typically muddy bottom for our crab. They don't like rocks, and they don't like, really steep edges or anything like that. So look for those muddy flats. And then I look at the tide and I think about what the current is doing on the bottom and how that might affect those areas. And then I start to spread some gear out, because I don't know where the crab are hiding, but I do know where they like to hang out as far as the terrain or the bottom structure. And then you kind of just start taking samples, so you spread everything out. You might let them soak on that first set for 12, 18, 24 hours, and then start checking. So, if you haul a pot on 18 hours and it has no crab in it, it's probably not going to have any crab in 24 hours. But if you haul one on 18 hours and it's got, let's say, 180 snow crab in it, that's pretty good. That maybe on your 24 hours, you got over 200, and, 36 hours, you're getting close to 400. So I'll come back and I'll just start kind of collecting the gear and collecting data. And those first couple days can be slow, because you're spreading the gear out. You're kind of taking a sample of where you think the crab are and where you think they should be. And then you circle back. And when you find something, you can set your gear on it actually fairly tight. And and then you can kind of hone in on them. And then, once you're on some crab, like let's say you might take a couple of days to find something, 3-4 days to find something, and you do find some crab. I mean, you can get on fishing that's you could fill the boat in 2 more days. And for us, that's essentially 250,000 pounds of crab. So it goes fast. So we fish 7 by 7 foot by 34-inch tall. So if they're 7 by 7 footprint, and then they're 34-inch tall when they're sitting on the seafloor. So they weigh about 800 pounds. When you're, if you're having to fish out deeper, you're adding more line to them. And then, that line, there's some more weight there. But yeah, they're 7 by 7 by 34-inch steel boxes, basically, with web strung in them. And then, obviously we bait them up and launch them over the side and come back and pick them up later. Some of the best trips I've ever been on, we've filled the boat in like 64, 72 hours. And, some of the longest ones are, you go for 2 weeks, and 2 weeks is about as long as we'll push the trip. We start to run out of bait, and then we also run out of time on the crab that we are putting in the tank. And, some of those 2 week trips, you only come up with, one tank, 70,000 pounds of crab, right? 60,000 pounds. And so the good comes with the bad.
Managing commercial fishing activity is a complicated job, one in which every small decision can have a far-reaching consequence. Whether to regulate fishing based on season, area or gear type, and whether to allot quotas for fishing activity, and if so, how many and to whom. The Bering Sea fishery has been operating under a strict managed quota system since around 2005. And whilst this can be frustrating, it's a management measure that fishermen must both respect and abide by.
It all depends on what our total allowable catch for the fleet is. So the way that our fishery works is we're on a quota system. There's IFQs that are allocated to individuals. And so we have kind of a collection of different boats and different people's quota that we're going out to harvest. And essentially we have the right to harvest a piece of the pie, right? And if that overall pie is larger or smaller based on any given year, then that's kind of how much that we go out and catch. So, for example, in 2021, last year's Opelio season, we had just over 600,000 pounds to catch. So it was about 4 trips. And then this year we had a 90% reduction in our total allowable catch, which made our piece of the pie at about 59,000 pounds. So we went from having like multiple full boatloads of crab to 1 tank of crab to catch in just 1 year's time. That's how big of a shift our stock has experienced recently.
Sean Dwyer's incredible story is too good for us to cut short. In a Fishtales Seafood podcast first, we'll be continuing his story in part 2, where we will hear about life on board a vessel fishing in the Bering Sea and becoming part of the incredible TV series Deadliest Catch.
Tragedy in our fishery is kind of, what spawns some of the allure to people. It's also like why we have the program called Deadliest Catch, is because it was the deadliest fishing job you could do, one of the deadliest jobs in the world.
Tune in next week to hear more of Sean's story. This is Fishtales, a seafood podcast. A Deep in the Weeds production. I'm John Susman. Follow us on Instagram at Fishtales Seafood Podcast or email us at fishtalespodcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay tuned for more tales from beneath the surface of the seafood world every Friday on your podcast app.